Izuku Midoriya has a hidden quirk that even he doesn't know about. And no, it's not the remaining powers that he has left to awaken in All for One. It's a quirk that Midoriya's had since the very beginning. But before we go out trying to prove that Midoriya even has a quirk, we need to first ask ourselves, how do the characters in My Hero Academia even get these magical superpowers called quirks? If you've seen the show, this should be an easy answer, but for those who have not seen it or just need a refresher, it's genetics. Typically appearing before the age of 4, children typically manifest either a singular quirk of one of their parents or a combination of quirks if they have two quirked parents. And while it is rare, currently there is a third option, which is to be born quirkless. But why has quirklessness become so rare? For the most part, it appears that it's primarily due to the quirks being hereditarily dominant, much like eye color. Using a Punnett square, we can see that even if just one person has a dominant trait like brown eyes, the chances for their children to have brown eyes is at least 50%. And if both partners have a dominant trait, that number can be up to almost 100%. So then why does it appear that Midoriya is quirkless if both of his parents have a quirk? Well, there is still the chance that if both of his parents have recessive alleles for quirklessness, there would be up to a 25% chance that their child could be quirkless. We have plenty of examples of people being born quirkless, including notable characters like Melissa Shield or All Might. One of those characters is a bit more notable, but you get the gist. So then why do I believe Midoriya wasn't born quirkless? Let's begin by checking our source on how we even know that Midoriya was quirkless in the first place. Midoriya's primary care physician explained that quirklessness is easier to determine than most would expect. According to his doctor, Midoriya would likely turn out quirkless as he has 2 joints in his pinky toes, as those with quirks normally have 1 joint. But this is where many fans and myself become dubious of Midoriya's doctor. Not only is Midoriya's doctor the only person to mention this fact, but his doctor bears a heavy resemblance to All for One's doctor, Dr. Ujiko. This leads many to believe that All for One and Dr. Ujiko stole Midoriya's quirk when he was very young. Now, this is where I part ways with many other theorists and believe that Midoriya still has the quirk he was born with. I believe Dr. Ujiko tells his patients the fake toe explanation for quirklessness to ensure that if a child begins manifesting a quirk later in life, they will seek medical attention given the abnormality, allowing time for All for One the chance to assess the quirk and properly steal it. So then where is it? Where's Midoriya's super flashy quirk, Jordan? I mean, just look at Midoriya's classmates, or even the class Todoroki and the other soon-to-be heroes watched over. We can see through even these small sample sizes that people are developing increasingly flashier and flashier quirks. Now, this is due to the quirks of the parents combining to create significantly more powerful quirks in their children. Bringing this back to genetics to explain this phenomenon further, instead of comparing quirks to eye color, let's look at quirks like blood. Functionally, it all works the same, besides when you receive both of the dominant alleles from each of your parents. If this occurs with blood alleles, you end up having something called codominance, where each of the dominant traits show up. So if you receive a type A allele from your mom and a type B allele from your dad, you'll have type AB blood. In the same way with quirks, if you receive alleles from both of your parents' dominant coded quirks, you could receive increasingly more powerful quirks, like Todoroki. In light of this information, I would like to argue that the recessive alleles are not always quirklessness, and can be instead recessive quirks. This would explain how characters like Eri have a quirk that doesn't have anything to do with either of her parents' quirks. Instead of a genetic mutation, I'm arguing that characters like Eri receive a recessive quirk allele from her mother and father to create a quirk like the flashier quirks, takes 2 seemingly unknown quirks and combines them into something new that can manifest. So what does this mean for Izuku Midoriya and the rest of the world of quirks? Well, to start, it means that the dominant gene quirks are becoming more and more prevalent. As more people are choosing partners with flashier quirks, more people are being born with 2 dominant alleles. As for recessive genes, I believe that this and this alone is how Izuku Midoriya and a larger majority of the population than we might expect have quirks. Quirks that are useless, unless you're in a unique situation at the right time. I mean, take Tonga or Stain's quirks that only activate when you taste someone else's blood, a situation that for most is rare to occur. But of course, people like Tonga were called to their quirk. Tonga was shown having intense desires to drink the blood of others, drinking birds' blood and even injuring a classmate to drink their blood. But what if you couldn't activate your quirk as easily? What if your quirk could only be activated if you reached 3,000 feet above sea level, or when someone else attacks you with their quirk? Or what if you need to be given quirks in order to use your own? That last one isn't as foreign as you might think. This actually is how All For One even became a thing. When All For One noticed his scrawny brother didn't have a quirk, he gave his brother a quirk to stockpile energy. Unbeknownst to All For One, his brother did have a quirk of his own that could transfer his quirk to another. This created One For All, and over time, users stacked their quirks upon one another until finally reaching Midoryia. And mirroring the first ever usage of the quirk, All Might gave the quirk to the seemingly quirkless Midoryia. But much like the origins of One For All, what if Midoryia wasn't quirkless after all? What if Midoryia has a quirk that can sort through the powers of others? A seemingly useless quirk that can categorize the powers of others within his body. Similar to a filing cabinet. Okay, I gotta stop showing my age. Similar to a hip and trendy Fortnite folder filled with all of your favorite Fortnite skins. Okay, I definitely made that worse. Just imagine a folder. In that folder would be a series of files, or quirks. For every other user of One For All, they can use the folder of quirks for raw power without opening the folder to fuel their own quirk. Midoriya's quirk, on the other hand, can open up the file and access the individual quirks, allowing him to use the individual quirks as initially intended. But why does Midoryia suddenly have access to all the quirks, unlike every other user? I can already see the comments.
Well, Midoryia can actually use all the powers due to the quirk singularity, changing the quirk's mechanics as it evolved.
But we already discussed this in our little genetics lesson. The quirk singularity is just hereditary genetics caused by new quirks to form out of codominance. And besides, Midoryia does not receive the quirk hereditarily, he receives it orally, and this does not follow any other quirk mutations we've seen occur thus far. So why does Midoryia get any extra privilege? Main character plot armor? No. But back to the quirk at hand. It's not like there's any other signs that Midoriya's quirk is attempting to manifest. Well, let's look back at our previous example of Toga and see how she discovered her quirk. She started attempting to drink her classmates' blood as a child to manifest her quirk. While it was odd and definitely gross, it was an instinctual trait. She was compelled to drink the blood of other people due to her quirk. Well, what does Midoryia have a compulsion to do? Oh, I don't know. Learn everything there is to know about other people's quirks, then write them down in literal journals to reference for later. Only to pull out a journal when other people are using their quirks to reference the specific page their quirk is on, in an odd attempt to understand their quirk and fighting strategies. Okay, I might need a second here. Phew. Midoryia has been showing these signs from the very beginning, and we chose to ignore them as they seemed like little fun quirks of his personality. But what we thought to be personality quirks were actually his body's attempt to manifest a superpowered quirk, propelling Midoryia to become the greatest user of One For All the power has ever seen. And with that, we've successfully proved that Midoryia is in fact a quirked up white boy, who may or may not be goated with the sauce. But that's a theory for another day. And with that, stay curious.